everybody, welcome back. I hope you are doing well. You have made it. We are at the 50% point, the halfway mark in your story. First and foremost, congratulations. I know it feels like you still have a long way to go, but whether you are writing along with this for the first time or you're working your way through revisions, hitting this point is a massive accomplishment, and you should celebrate it. Celebrate your hard work, your creativity, and just how far you've come. Then, once you've had your celebratory break, book, donut, drink, whatever shape that takes for you, come back and we will dive into the next turning point, which is the point of no return. We already talked about this a little bit last week, but for anybody jumping in here, we are now talking about the point of no return, which is the third turning point in Michael Haig's 6-stage plot structure. This signals the halfway point for your plot and your character's journey. So again, for anybody loving the percentages out there, this should hit right around that 50% mark. As I mentioned before, this turning point is very aptly named. The point of no return is just that. It is a moment in the main character's journey in the story arc where something happens to forever change their lives. And unlike in the new situation, there's no coming back from this. The only way forward is through. And this can take on a variety of forms depending on the type of story that you're writing or the genre. So for romance novels, the point of no return could be that the main character realizes that they do truly have feelings for the hero or heroine or whoever you're following. Or like I mentioned in the last video, it could be maybe that they sleep together for the first time. So like in a fake dating or a roommate situation. It is very hard to go back to being friends or just roommates once you've seen each other naked. Or in a romantic suspense story, maybe they realize that the stalker is real, the main character actually is in trouble, and that helps the hero realize that their feelings are true for the heroine, and they have to figure out how to deal with both a stalker and real feelings, and they move forward from there. On the sci-fi fantasy side of things, this is usually where the plot deepens and becomes more personal. So maybe the main character was trying to save the world before and they made some progress, and then the point of no return is when their mentor dies or their best friend gets kidnapped or something like that. And now they're still trying to save the world, but it is that much more personal and that much more desperate and complicated as you move into the next stage. Or maybe it's a story where the main character finds out how truly evil the king is. They see the horrors with their own eyes, and now they realize they cannot try to solve things diplomatically anymore, and they have to move forward now that they know things are truly life and death, and they have to figure out a new way. Or just for stories in general, it might be that a main character is on the verge of achieving their goal, and then something absolutely terrible happens to where they have to completely change their goal. Not only just the way they're going to achieve it, but their goal completely changes. It flies out the window because nothing can be done the same way it was before. Whatever form this takes for you, your story, your genre, there are two key things to keep in mind with the point of no return. First, make sure your point of no return is big enough and personal enough. If the turning point for your characters here isn't strong enough, you're not going to have enough to carry you through the higher stakes and complications. Or the other issue might be that your logic isn't going to work. So you have a problem happen and you go into the next stage, but the readers are still wondering why they can't just do it this way, or why the main character can't just go back to normal, why they can't just ignore X, Y, and Z. And that's exactly what you don't want to happen. It needs to be a forever change. It needs to be something that is so bad that it's going to push them into those higher stakes leading towards your climax. Because at this stage, your main characters and your readers need to be fully committed. They need to be moving full force towards that end. Second, this middle point is sort of like a touchstone for your story arcs. You've got all these moving pieces that made a ton of progress in the last progress stage, and now you need to make sure everything's hitting this middle point in and around the same time. It may not happen all exactly at once, but you want to make sure you're keeping track of all of these moving pieces that you have, because it's very easy to lose sight of something, and you want to make sure you're keeping the pacing of everything moving forward and hitting these key turning points. For romance novels, you want to make sure your subplots, be it a mystery, a suspense, what have you, is hitting all of these marks as well as the love story. So everything's working together as you move forward. The same thing times about 10 goes for sci-fi and fantasy, because you'll not only have multiple plots and subplots, but you're going to have probably an outrageous number of main characters. So you want to make sure you're keeping track of all of that and making sure you're hitting this point. And then again, jumping back to point one, making sure it's big enough for when you lead into the higher stakes and complication stage that's next. Like I talked about with the progress section, when you're trying to make sure you're progressing enough on each plot line, you may want to write this out just to make sure you know where everything's going and that you're keeping track of everything, especially if you have tons of main characters, maybe you have multiple points of views, maybe you have a couple of different subplots. You want to make sure you know where everything's at, especially if this is in the revision stage for you. If you're writing for the first time, it's good to keep all of this in mind, but the important part is to keep moving forward, right? You want to get to the end. If you're revising, that's where you really want to dive into this and make sure you're hitting this at the best possible moment, or most likely the worst possible moment for your characters, and having all of this work together as you then give them this absolute nightmare that they have to deal with as they move into higher stakes and complications. One exception to note here is if you have a series subplot, which is very common both in romance and in sci-fi fantasy and sci-fi fantasy romance. Everything there in between. If you have something that is a plot that is going to continue through several books, this is obviously not your halfway point. So you don't want to follow the same plot structure for that as you would for this plot structure that's focused just on this one book. So that's something that is a probably completely separate video, so you don't have to worry about that hitting at the same time as all of these other story and character arcs that you have here. So then once you have put your characters through this point of no return, they are going to dive into stage 4, which is the higher stakes and complications. Next week, I'm going to be talking about books that are coming out in June. You won't want to miss it. There are so many good books coming out this summer. And then the week after that, we will dive into that next stage. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Not only does it help the channel, but then you'll know not to miss any videos when they go up. And until next week, keep writing.